Welcome, students. Today we're starting our next big study, which is a study of a species. A couple weeks ago we studied classes of animals. We talked about animals that share common characteristics. For example, I might say I have scales, I get oxygen through gills from water, and you might guess that I am a fish. I might say that I'm warm-blooded, that I care for my young, that I have hair on my body, and that I get around by flying or swimming or walking on two legs or four legs. You might say that I'm a mammal. So these are big classes of animals. Mammals include bats and zebras and mice and giraffes. They're all very different animals, but they are all warm-blooded and they all have fur or hair, and they all give birth to live young. So they're all mammals. They all have that in common, but giraffes are different than mice. So today we're going to look at what do we call these different types of mammals, and we call them species. So we're just going to look a little bit at what that means to be a species. Now, a species is a group of similar individuals in a class of animals that have the ability to reproduce. In other words, it's like a group of animals, or plants, or any living thing that have common characteristics that are all classified as being the same in some way. So we can say a species of bat. Now, bats and wolves and chimpanzees are all mammals, but a species is one type of mammal, like bat, that all have similar characteristics. That means they all fly, for example, or use echolocation to get around, and they're able to reproduce with each other. So two bats can have a baby bat. So wolves are different than bats because wolves, they don't fly, obviously, and they're much bigger, and there's many differences between a wolf and a bat that make them different than each other. Even though they're both mammals, even though they both have fur, they are different than each other, obviously. And two wolves can reproduce and have a wolf, and two bats can reproduce and have a bat, but a wolf and a bat can't reproduce, so they're not the same species. So we have a couple examples here. We have the bat is one example of a species. Wolf is another example of a species, Canis lupus. Chimpanzee, or Pan troglodytes, is another example of a species. These are different species. You'll notice here that there are two different names for each species. We'll talk about that in a moment here as well. Why do they have two different names? That's interesting, isn't it? So what does species mean? So we were just talking about how they're the same class of animals, but they have different characteristics, and they can reproduce with each other. So here's some different species of fish, for example. We have a clownfish, or Amphiprione, Ninone. Those Greek names are tough to pronounce. Or a great white shark, Carcharodon, Carcharias, or a lionfish, Pterois. They are all fish. They all have scales. They all get oxygen with gills from the water, for example. But you notice that a clownfish looks a specific way. It has a specific kind of markings. All clownfish are, I know, immune to the poison of a sea anemone, so they can hide in a sea anemone like that. Great white sharks are much different because they're gigantic fish. And a lionfish is very different because it has this kind of crazy body that gives it fantastic camouflage in a coral reef for hunting. A great white shark and a lionfish cannot reproduce together, so they are not the same species, and also they are much different animals. So, so that is what a species is. A species is a specific type of animal within a class of animals. Now, why do they have two names? Did you notice that? Like for humans, for example, we're called humans, but we're also called Homo sapiens. In a language, we have a common name, like human. That's a generic name. So we call that the generic name, and it's just what most people call it. And different species have different generic names in different languages, like perro means dog in Spanish, and it's dog in English. But scientific names, they're the names that are used by the scientific community, and they usually contain a little bit of information. Um, they usually contain a little bit of information in the name itself, and that tells you a little bit about the species. And also, that name is commonly used in different languages as well. So in science, it's a more specific and accurate name. It's just usually a little harder to pronounce, but it's kind of fun to learn a little bit about those different names, those scientific names rather. Um, So we looked at some examples of different classes, but you're going to be choosing one species that you want to do some research about. We're going to study animals primarily here, and here I've just collected a few cool species of animals, just again to give you a sense of what different species are. So there's Homo sapiens, but there are different species of plants too, right? Like a baby rose, Rosa multiflora, or a horseshoe crab is a species of invertebrate actually, or a Japanese beetle is a species of an animal. These are different species, and this week you will be choosing a species that you want to research. Now, there's lots of different resources you can use to find your species. This week, all you got to do is pick which species do you want to research. You can go on Tumble Books. It's probably the best source for researching um, for choosing an animal. You can choose Encyclopedia Britannica, Newsela. These are all great resources for selecting a species that you want to research. So do some research, find a species that you think is really, really cool, that you're going to want to learn way more about, and have some fun. This week, all you got to do is just tell us what species do you want to research, and why did you pick that species.